Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of The Wheel of Time, Season 2, Episodes 1 through 3, which all dropped on the same day. The synopsis, kind of combined for all three episodes on IMDb, would read Moraine, Lan, Nynaeve. It's spelled kind of Nynaeve, but Nynaeve is how they say it. Nynaeve, Egwene, Perrin, and Matt find themselves more alone than ever. The Two Rivers youths forge new relationships while Lan tries to mend an old one. Nynaeve faces her greatest fears. Rand seeks guidance on his powers from an unexpected source. Okay, so I enjoyed the premiere of the first season, as I mentioned in my review of that, and I continued watching the rest of it and really enjoyed it. It didn't blow me away like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing in the world, but it was finally the meat and potatoes fantasy live-action show for adults that is not obsessed with sex scenes that I've wanted for a long time. And so I've been having a really great time just engaging with this show. This season was off to a slow start, I've got to say. Let's talk about just the basic flow, the vibe of this thing. The characters do start out separated, and that helps them introduce new supporting cast members surrounding each of the returning cast members from last season, and creates opportunity for some new character development and arcs to start, but it also halts the core cast's relational progression with each other. And I would have preferred a core cast focus more and build in those additional cast members over time. I understand they're working with the source material. I'm not really... I tried reading The Wheel of Time after enjoying the premiere, and I just can't handle the writing style. That's a different story. I can get to that another time, but I'm not reviewing this based on its fidelity to the series or compared to the book series. Any of that is just, what do I think of it as it is? So I'm not suggesting they should change some things or whatever, because that would of course be like, oh, the books, but the books. I think they're already kind of doing some crazy stuff that some fans don't like anyway. But anyway, so yeah, I would have preferred, if they could have, to have the introduction of those additional characters happen further into the story and start us out with those core characters that I'm already invested in. I'm also waiting for Egwene as a character to develop into what feels like more than a very sweet girl. Right now, that's largely what she feels like to me. She's was a love interest for Rand, and maybe a little bit for, what was the other character's name? Was it Perrin? Might have been Perrin. I think it was Perrin. And you know, not much more than just kind of like a little bit of a trophy to be sought. I think they tried to kind of build her up as her own character with her own motives and stuff. But I want more given to that. Right now, she's still in that very sweet, timid girl kind of mold, and I'd like something more complex to be going on with her, which they may be getting into because they introduce a theme of jealousy that she has for Nynaeve, and Nynaeve's just immense giftedness in the One Power. But anyway, there are some skirmishes here and there in these first few episodes, but season 1 had like this seeming invasion of Trollocs at the first episode. I mean, it really kicked things off, more so than the book. I read the first third of the first book, and so I can tell you that by comparison, oh man, there's really action happening in the front of the first season that was not in the book. And there's also the sense of this looming evil in the first season, and there's this invasion that's kind of teased at the end of season 1 as kind of a sort of pseudo cliffhanger thing, and that really arrives later and a little bit more softly, or maybe mostly later. I guess when it does finally arrive, it's pretty intense, but that's not till like episode 3. So it just didn't kick things off really with the intensity that the first season did. Episode 3 is really when things kick off for me. The invasion really comes into play. There's major turning points for two characters. The villains enter with full force, with terrible brutality, and by the end I was very invested in Nynaeve in a way that I never thought that I would have been just watching her in season 1. And like, I can't wait to see more of her character and what they do with her this season. Can't wait for episode 4 at this point. I can imagine that I will be glad they invested in most of the moments that they invested in during episodes 1 and 2, but I still wish that we could have reached episode 3 moments in episode 2 instead of having to wait. That said, I know the source material moves even more slowly than this, and this is probably the only way I'm potentially going to enjoy a version of this story. So I'm not really complaining, especially when I get this meat and potatoes fantasy that I like so much. Okay, as far as the cast, they all still feel pretty solid to me. Nobody is really stunning me and blowing me away. The actor portraying Rand often comes across to me as though he's just kind of focused on keeping a straight face. I'm not sure that's not being very charitable in that description, but that's just kind of the expression that comes to mind. And so I'm trying to figure out what it is about his performance that sometimes feels like it's not quite real or right to me. But there's emotion being asked of almost all of the performers here, and I think they largely deliver. So I don't really have any serious complaints about the performances. As far as the stunts and visuals, the effects are commonplace, and I want that in my fantasy, but they're not premium quality. I wish that this had the budget and the polish of the visuals in Amazon's The Rings of Power, but it all still feels very solid. And I also appreciate the hybrid approach to the effects for the Trollocs, which seem to use largely like prosthetics or makeup, costume type stuff, but now and then they will use CG to kind of animate and move parts of the facial mask instead of doing like just a full-on CG thing. Now, I could be wrong in what technique they're using, but that seems to be the technique that is being used, and I like that because then, at least otherwise, it looks 100% present and there in the shot with the actors. It's just a lot more convincing than going full-on CG. So I like the philosophy of creature effects that they're employing in this series. Okay, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Maybe. I think things are mostly just being set up at this point. There are character arc setups that include themes of jealousy, of fighting dangerous internal impulses, of recognizing your history of selfishness and then making the choice to change, and then also a theme of communication in relationships. But most striking to me was not really a theme, because I don't know that it's going to be developed at all, but it was this scene where a character is going through a sort of ritual, a sort of proving, and part of it, when they come out the other end, they are told by those that are officiating the ritual, as they dump water on them, you are washed clean of your sins and the sins committed against you. And they don't give any kind of context. Is this from a religious tradition in this fictional world, or where is this coming from? What is the basis for being washed clean of your sins, and how do sins, in the worldview that's being suggested here, how do sins committed against a person make the person unclean? I can imagine in the real world a way that sins of others can affect us and kind of, through then choices we make, cause us to become unclean, but that's still ultimately our sin and how we're reacting to being sinned against. So there's just kind of like some interesting concepts going on there that, for once, I'm usually not super interested in lore. I'm like, I want to dig into that lore. So I'm wondering if that's going to be fleshed out with a relevant worldview that's going to be developed and brought to the surface in the story, or is this just kind of a moment of empty ritual for characters that we're supposed to think is just part of an empty old religion that nobody actually follows anymore? It's just part of their ritual and their ceremony and stuff. I don't know, but I'll be kind of keeping my eyes out to see if that idea returns. And really, I'll be watching all of the character arc themes for the basis of resolutions to these problems. How is jealousy dealt with by the characters? How are destructive impulses fought? How does one deal with their own guilt and shame and then bring about change in their lives? That the answers to those questions are really going to, I think, say a lot about the worldview philosophy behind the writing, and I think could give us some worthwhile things to think about, whether we agree with them or not. Anyway, I have no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, well, watch this for sure. You're invested in the first season. You want to keep going. But know that the first 2 episodes are going to be slow going. Don't let them turn you off and think, I guess you're not going to enjoy the show anymore. It's a good thing that they dropped all 3 episodes. They probably did that with a purpose, and you'll feel that when you get to episode 3. So make it to the 3rd episode. That's going to make it worth getting through the first 2, and it's going to re-energize your interest in this series. This one's rated 16 plus for violence and foul language, and those are all of my thoughts for now on The Wheel of Time Season 2, episodes 1 through 3. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making so much of my content possible. You can get more info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then, as always, I hope you will check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.